Honestly, if San Martin had just gone with a Seiko NH35, this review would be a lot easier and a lot shorter. Evidently, someone over there was listening, because that's exactly what they did. Although, let me take a step back for a second and get you all up to speed. About a year ago, I saw one of the more interesting semi-original San Martins. This is the SN0036-G, a watch that I always look back and think of as the Sea-Terra. Because when I look at this one, it reminds me of a mix between a Seamaster and an Aqua-Terra. Although from the comments, some of you also saw Planet Ocean, and a few of you even mentioned Grand Seiko, perhaps because of the bezel. Regardless where the inspiration came from, I looked at it and thought it was a well-made, good-looking watch, which unfortunately, due to their choice of movements, stumbled out of the gate a bit, or rather stuttered. That's a longer story. But what you need to know is that San Martin is back with a new updated version that fixes that, as well as adds a few other interesting bits. And before we get any further, I want to point out that this watch was provided by San Martin, and they're not asking for it back, hence the promotional tag at the beginning. So for this one, the updated SN0036-G-B, and side note, San Martin, making these numbers a little bit easier to remember would be a good thing. Anyway, the case here is 42.5 millimeters wide with a lug-to-lug of 48.5, as well as a total thickness of 13.8. So for the most part, the dimensions here are in line with a mid-sized diver. Now for those of you in the 40mm and under club, I know this isn't going to be exactly what you want. But know that because of the sleek nature of the case, it looks and wears a bit slimmer than that. And on my 7.25 inch wrist, it feels more like a 41, maybe a 41.5. It's got a good solid feel to it at 175 grams on its bracelet. And overall, it's very balanced and comfortable, especially with the taper of that bracelet. If they had gone with female end links here, I think even more so. But again, it still feels good on the wrist. Rounding everything out, this one now has 300 meters of water resistance with a signed screw-down crown, as well as a subtly domed sapphire crystal with AR, a ceramic bezel, and it's all powered by a standard Seiko NH35A. Now the case here has a very similar design to the first version, which to me is very Aqua-Terra-ish, with its narrow but longer case shape. This is one that's firmly in the tool watch camp, with its mostly brushed case. Yet, it's also got a couple of refined touches, with the polished twisted lugs and a long slender chamfer running down each side, further highlighting its sleek and sexy profile. I know a subby style case is much more popular, but to my eye, this is far more interesting. With the original version, there wasn't any sort of crown guards to it, which is something they've added here. And as crown guards go, they're fairly subtle, and the crown is still pretty easy to get a hold of and use. As a side note, this one does have a ghost date. I know a lot of you don't care, but I also know some of you just hate that. But back to the crown guards. Now, here they're not a drastic change, yet it is one that gives this a more distinct case shape, and in some ways makes it look a little bit more Seamaster. Over at the right, you may have also noticed the addition of a helium escape valve, which to me is just so 2018. And it's something I haven't talked about in years. For a while, it seemed like every new release that was coming out had a helium escape valve, until they realized that no one really cared. And it's not like a helium escape valve is a bad thing, it's just that there are only a handful of people on the entire planet who actually need it. And for the rest of us, it just winds up being an interesting conversation starter, or a lint collector. For the bezel here, it's 120 click, unidirectional, minimal backplay, all the good stuff. Plus, just a fantastic clicky action. I mean, just listen to this. That's fantastic. This is how a bezel should be done. And with this colorway, it also comes with a black ceramic insert, just for increased scratch resistance. Although there is one issue with it, and I'm betting a few of you have already caught it, and that's that it's not quite lined up. It's off, maybe by just a degree. So it's not bad, especially for the price, but it does show that San Martin needs to be careful as they grow, as it's a slippery slope to Seicoville. As for the dial, this one is definitely Seamaster inspired, where the indices are a mixture of dots and dashes at the cardinal points, as well as you have this segmented chapter ring at the very outer edge. Even the skeletonized hands are a bit Seamasterish. However, it's also important to note that as a whole, this isn't a straight copy. There are some minor differences here, and in particular the shape of the hands are different, including switching the second hand to a hexagon, just a small nod to San Martin's logo. This is the type of design that's right up my alley for a diver. There's just a lot of elements that I love all rolled into one, like the dashes at the cardinal points, forming a perfect crosshair, as well as the no-date dial, creating a very clean and symmetric look. So I've always been a sucker for skeletonized hands, and especially ones like these where they're not flat, and you can see how the light reflects off their angles and edges. Plus, you got the fume gradient here, and that is one of the major differences between this version and the original. And with this blue one, I think it flows perfectly into the black ceramic bezel, making the red tip of the second hand even more eye-catching. Although, unfortunately, San Martin did not address one of my other criticisms, and that's that the watch has a bit of a glare and reflection issue, and I think most of that's coming from the crystal. As you can see, it's an issue here as well. So perhaps more AR. A lot more. Lume-wise, San Martin went with a healthy dose of blue BGW9. And because of the skeletonized hands, I think it's really cool looking how the tip of the minute hand just hovers over the indices at the outer edge. But this one isn't just for show, as it's also able to go the distance, keeping up with a Seiko diver. So once again, San Martin shows it understands Lume. As for the bracelet, well, other than not having female end links, it's great. The solid end links have a nice tight fit, while the solid links look great with their polished chamfers, lining up perfectly with the twisted lugs, and highlighting the sleek taper of the bracelet as it heads towards the clasp, which has also been upgraded with an on-the-fly adjustment system. So, a little more refined and useful than the previous version. But overall extremely well made and impressive for the price. And as a side note, with my 7¼ inch wrist, I didn't even bother taking any links off. I just pushed it all the way down. It is a tad loose, but I think it's good enough with the summer heat and humidity. Speaking of price, they're currently running about $240 US, but I also know that there's a sale coming. No idea what it's going to be dropped to, but you can expect it to be at least $240, which considering what you're getting is great. When it comes to value, typically you're not going to find anything to beat that outside of AliExpress. And if you are interested in this one, then you should probably also check out their newer 2023 homages of the Sub and Black Bay. Those are a little bit smaller. They have enamel dials as well as a ceramic bezel, but you still get that same adjustable clasp, as well as being just a tad bit cheaper. So there is a bit more value there, but they are homage watches. And for me, I think this one's a lot more interesting. Bottom line, great looking watch and a nice refined update from the first version. It's well made and attractive. It's one that maintains a tool watch aesthetic with a touch of flash. And I like that there's some familiar elements here, but not quite enough of anything in particular to scream homage. There are a few things here that I would change to make it better, like female end links, but overall it's still pretty good. Ideally, this is going to be for someone looking for a watch that's high on value. One that isn't another subby clone, something a little more interesting. And that's exactly what this is. And I wish San Martin would really do more of these kinds of designs instead of just the homages. And I have to say that out of all the San Martin divers I've seen, I think this one is my current favorite. Partly because it is semi-original. But what do you think about it? Let me know down below. And if you're curious what this red thing is on my wrist, it's the new Jet Diver from Bulova. If you know me, I couldn't resist getting this one. I had to order it as soon as I heard about it. So review coming hopefully soon, but just stay tuned. And as always, you guys know what to do down below. Like, comment, subscribe, you know the routine. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.